100% get life insurance. And I don't care if you have kids or not, whether or not you have kids, 100% get life insurance, you and your partner, your spouse, because if you are going to be in a situation where you're with a partner, the two of you together are maybe buying a house, or if you're not buying a house, maybe you're paying rent somewhere, and you have two incomes. You have two people that are contributing to whatever that is. And so if you don't even have kids, you still have shared expenses. And so when if that person were to pass away, you're still left with all of those expenses with half your income, or whatever that person made, you don't have anymore. And if you have children, maybe you do it. If you're going to get married, maybe you do it before you get married. If you're going to have kids, you sit down and have that serious conversation before you have the kids and say, hey, look, if one of us is staying home, the person who stays home, absolutely, like, we have to set what that person will get each week, each month in their savings to do either, to save some to do with what they want. And I think that's super important, because it gives the person left behind a chance to say, okay, like, we didn't want this to happen, but I do know that this is.
So what's the most impactful of the 5 Ds that I talk about in my book is the effect of the death of the partner. And it's not just the effect on the surviving spouse, but it also is going to, of course, impact any surviving children. So this is Felicia Gopaul of the Her Money podcast. And with me today, of course, is my co-host, Mandy Herring. And you are listening to the Her Money Story podcast. Today, we're going to be chatting with Kelly Gwe, who is going to be talking about her story about what happened when her husband passed away. But this is a friend of Mandy. So Mandy, would you introduce us to today's guest and tell us a little bit about her, please?
Yeah, thanks, Felicia. Yeah, I'm really excited to have Kelly here. When we talked about your book and going through the 5 Ds, Kelly was one of the first people I thought of, and I reached out to her, and she, without hesitation, said, yes, I'd be happy to talk. So really excited that we were able to make this happen and to get her here. So you guys are in for a treat today, because even though we're talking about a topic that, might not be something that people want to think about, Kelly really brings a really bright view of life and dealing with the death of a spouse. So I'm really excited to share her story with you guys. So a little bit about Kelly is that she lives in Massachusetts. She's a widowed single mom raising 4 kids. And I love how she puts this. She's raising 4 kids to thrive, not just survive, in the face of losing their dad 9 years ago to cancer. And she actually wrote a really wonderful book we'll talk about in a little bit called Refuse to Sink, going through her experiences as being a widowed single mom and again, having that optimistic approach to it. So Kelly, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm going to kick things off and ask you to kind of go back and think about, first and foremost, what's money like for you and your family when you were growing up?
My parents were really well off. My dad owned a business that did really well, and I didn't know it at the time. I was lucky because I had parents who were, very humble, and they gave a lot to a lot of people, and they would, my dad would give you the shirt off his back, and they were just very generous people. And it never occurred to me, I guess, that we were well off growing up. I look back and I realize we were lucky enough to have a summer home, and there was nothing that I really needed. Nothing, it was definitely something I look back and I'm very blessed on.
Yeah. So Felicia wrote a book called Dealing with the 5Ds, and you're just inspired by, different things that women face that, oftentimes unexpected. And so, could you tell us a little bit about your story about Bobby and, kind of the impact that had when you lost him?
Sure. Well, so I have 2 degrees, and one in exercise science, one in early childhood education. But we made a choice we wanted a big family, so we made a choice that I was going to stay home. It was just more cost effective, and he was making over 6 figures, doing really well for our family. And so I stayed home and I was raising our 4 children. I homeschooled for 7 years before he was sick, 6 years before he was sick, 1 year afterwards. He was very adamant that he couldn't get life insurance because he said it would be bad luck if he got it. And that was a point of contention for us without me working. It was definitely a tougher situation because I grew up not having to worry about money, and I was in a marriage where he made plenty for our family. I also, though, saw that he wanted to be in charge of it, and that made it hard. It's like you look back in that life lesson, so he wouldn't get life insurance, and we were lucky that he worked for the DOD, the Department of Defense. He worked for the Air Force. So we were really lucky in that respect that they had some form of money when he passed away. We didn't get a ton, but we did get one lump sum that at least would help to get some bills paid and to get me, on my feet, so to speak. I, however, had been staying at home and hadn't been using either one of my degrees. It was my choice to stay home. He passed away in May of 2015, and it was my choice to stay home that following year and still homeschool my children because we all want to be really invested in our kids. And I couldn't imagine their dad dying in May and then these kids who had never been in a public or private school just having another huge change in their life. So it was a really interesting year, 2015 to 2016 school year. I juggled way too much. And that led to me saying, okay, guys, let's start thinking about school. My daughters were going to be entering 4th and 6th the following year. So we started to look at a couple schools, and they chose one that they loved, a tiny school that was private, that we got a lot of help on tuition. Thank God, so that they could go there. And I still stayed home because I had a first grader I homeschooled. He was just not ready to go anywhere, to be away from me. And I had a 2-year-old with no life insurance and just trying to, have a mortgage, still had car payments. I mean, he had actually just bought 2 fairly new vehicles. He had gotten me a family car, and oddly enough, I think the irony is crazy here. He had bought death insurance on it after he was diagnosed with cancer. He was able to find a plan. However, he had to live a certain amount of time in order for it to kick in. And he passed away 2 weeks before that time would have kicked in to pay the full price of the vehicle.
Wow.
So that was kind of like, really, guys, really, So, I ended up selling his truck, and it just takes a long time because when somebody dies, you're grieving them. Having children, having 4 kids, it's like I'm trying to grieve the loss of my partner, my best friend. And that's a totally separate thing from trying to help your children grieve the loss of their father. And that's an entirely separate thing from trying to figure out moving forward how you're going to make an income. And what you need to make it work. And that's a whole separate thing from the logistics of just running a household. And then when someone dies, there's a whole other separate part to that of the logistics of taking care of their estate and anything that comes at you. I mean, there's so many things, like I can't even remember any given day what was coming at you. And it's too much. It's like way too much for one person to deal with. And so that's like the best picture, I guess, that I can paint. It's like, it's just chaos. It's chaos, and you're just doing the best that you can. And you miss a lot of things where people are like, oh, you forgot such and such. And you're like, I feel bad, but.
So that being said, then, now that you've, spent many years working through this, what is like 1 to 2 pieces of advice you would give your younger self? So someone listening to this who may be going through that situation now, looking back, what are 1 or 2 pieces of advice you would give yourself?
100% get life insurance. And I don't care if you have kids or not, whether or not you have kids, 100% get life insurance, you and your partner, your spouse, because if you are going to be in a situation where you're with a partner, the two of you together are maybe buying a house, or if you're not buying a house, maybe you're paying rent somewhere, and you have 2 incomes. You have 2 people that are contributing to whatever that is. And so if you don't even have kids, you still have shared expenses. And so when if that person were to pass away, you're still left with all of those expenses with half your income, or whatever that person made, you don't have anymore. And if you have children, and whether you're staying home or not, if you're not staying home, it's the same thing. It's like now you have even more expenses because you have the expense of the children. And if you're staying home, looking back, I know, based on the relationship, based on the man and the way that my husband was and how stubborn he was, I know that it probably would have been a fight to have money that he gave me for that purpose, for a separate account, or and that was, a lot of that was based on the way that he was raised, without a lot of money. So he was very tight when he did make anything. I would say that another piece of advice, though, looking back, would be, no matter what situation you're in, always make sure you have an agreement. Maybe you do it if you're going to get married. Maybe you do it before you get married. If you're going to have kids, you sit down and have that serious conversation before you have the kids and say, hey, look, if one of us is staying home, the person who stays home, absolutely, like, we have to set what that person will get each week, each month, in their savings, to do either, to save some to do with what they want. And I think that's super important, because it gives the person left behind a chance to say, okay, like, we didn't want this to happen, but I do know that this is something that I have on top of the life insurance. I do have this because I got into the situation where I never thought I would get into, where it's like, okay, a stay-at-home mom, I'm making no income, and I have a husband that doesn't, quote unquote, give me an income. And it's just, it's a way to get really, really stuck. And I don't recommend it for anyone, male or female.
It's funny that you should share this, Kelly, because it's a recurring thing that I've heard again and again from women who are stay-at-home mothers, or stay-at-home for whatever reason, and that they didn't have their own money, and so they often felt stuck. And it's not that they didn't love their husbands, and that it's not that their husbands didn't love them, but it's just like just having your own money just gives you a flexibility and a freedom that not having any money or being completely dependent upon the other person really, and it really, for me, drives home how, my parents got divorced and my mother was a stay-at-home mother. and my father kind of handled the finances. And I just remember you talked about the fight. My father was one of those people. It was just like, it's my money. Well, no, it's not. It's our money that you are bringing home, and you're working for it, but I'm still working. And for some of the women that I've talked to, they felt like their labors and their contribution was diminished because they weren't being compensated for that. And I don't know that that's necessarily true for you, but I know that that was certainly true for some of the women that I've talked to on this podcast and in my practice about the dynamics of not having any income that was specific to you. And I love your idea of having money put into an account just for you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think it's a very common story, like more common than we think it is. And it's something that happens so slowly that you don't think about what's happening. And I definitely felt like maybe what I was doing wasn't appreciated. And there's times that I'll look back. I've done this and I've thought, how do I believe life would have been different if he survived and I didn't, if he was a stay-at-home dad with 4 kids. And I automatically think, okay, his parents probably would have stepped in to take over as much as they could. He would have stayed working full time and just been like, here you go, you're going to school, you're going to after school care, and because of money being something that he was it was like the extreme, because he had grown up poor. He was very, like, he wanted to make a lot and he wanted to hold on to it, if that makes sense. And so there has to be like a happy medium there. I don't regret any of the things that I've done as far as like since he's passed away. I think that, I remember right after he died, a guy that he worked with came over and he said, well, what are you going to do now? I mean, have you started looking for a job? And thank God for Social Security death benefits and for the little money that we did have saved. And, friends, and my dad was still alive at the time, who helped me tremendously. And I'm so grateful, because we need that. But I just thought that man was really ignorant in how he was speaking, because when we look at it from a mother's perspective, and I don't want to generalize, like I'm sure there are dads out there like this too, but in my own experience, when I look at it from my perspective, I thought my focus is on making sure my children are okay and that we're okay mentally. And maybe we won't be rich because of it, but I want to make sure that we're happy. And those two things do not necessarily go hand in hand. And so it was fully my intention to make sure that they were okay. And then to do the best that I could. And I found a flexible schedule. That was my intent, was whatever I do, I am 100% going to be there for these kids. And this other person won't understand that, but they don't have their dad. They need their mom, and I need them. And and it's that whole mental health aspect to it that you want to take care of. And we became a team. I still need them and they still need me, even though teenage girls do not think they do. But
I have 2, so I got it.
Right. That's a different podcast. And I think that looking back at it, I don't regret all of the sports events that I've been to. There's been times that money has been so hard and so tight, and I've needed to, borrow and flip this around and flip that around and sell this and sell that. But everything that I've done has been with the intention of making sure that I was still able to have a profession that gave me purpose, that I love, that gives me joy in my life, which I would put over having billions of dollars any day. It gives me a chance to be at volleyball and coach baseball and watch lacrosse games and pick my kids up from school and take them for ice cream and do those things. And sometimes I think my kids take that for granted, and I'll say something like, well, you know, if I do have to miss something, because we all have to miss something, and they complain, I'll say, well, you know, I've been at everything else. Or how many times am I at something and you look around and there aren't many parents there? We're very lucky that I've found a way through the years to be able to do that. And it's just a totally different dynamic. And I don't knock anyone whose spouse dies and they say, crap, I better get a 9-to-5 right now, and I'll have to figure it out with the kids. It's really on our priorities. I just don't regret my priorities. As much as money's been hard and there's been really, really difficult times where I just had to work on faith, and still I do plenty. I just think that that's the most important thing to me, was always making sure my kids are okay, and making sure that I, this time, and you know, this is a blip when your kids are younger and they're in these activities, and I don't want to look back and be like, oh, I was never there, I never saw them do this or that. And that's what has been just like on the forefront for me.
Yeah, there's so much you said there, you know, about being happy and being there, and, you know, understanding, acknowledge that there are trade-offs, and that's okay. You know, that we can't have everything. And even with your background, you know that, you know, there's always going to be trade-offs, and being giving and having a community and being a team. I love all that. And that makes me think about your book. And so can you talk a little bit about the book? I'll have to say that the one chapter that really hit me and what I'm going through right now is the Don't Feel Bad for Me. So can you talk a little bit about your book, and in particular, the Don't Feel Bad for Me?
Sure. So writing has always been something, and journaling's always been something that helped me to heal, helped me to just, you know, my release. So I started a blog about a year after my husband died, and I started it really just for myself, and others heard it, others read it, and, you know, got a hold of it, and were just so encouraging to me, saying like that my stories, and I had strangers that would message me or email me and say thank you, or comment on the blog, because it was on WordPress, it still is, and just thank me for sharing my day-to-day. And what it was just any given day, the stuff that I was going through, navigating grief and raising kids as a single mom, and trying to do it with humor, because you have to, in my opinion. There's like, otherwise you're just going to lose your mind. So for me, the book was a natural progression. I always wanted to write a book. So when everything shut down, when COVID happened, I had always had it in the back of my head, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to write a book. And I was teaching at several gyms. I was teaching group fitness classes, personal training. My business was growing really nicely, and it was awesome. And then the gym shut down, and that was that. I was home. I homeschooled that year again, because we had done it and I was home anyways. I also decided, well, okay, now let's do this. Let's write the book. It ended up taking me 2 years, because I self-published it, and there were just so many mistakes that I made and had to go back and change, but I did it. And the entire book, to me, is a tribute to how you can live through grief, how you can live through chaos, and still do it with humor, still really, truly find joy out of your life, and have hope. I mean, throughout the book, so many things happened, throughout the blog, throughout life, you know, where there were other losses, and I just would come back to that thread of hope. The chapter that you mentioned, you know, Don't Feel Bad for Me, that entry, that whole theme, it's like I've never wanted anyone's pity. And I'll have a conversation with somebody, and sometimes I'll say, in my head, I'll say, this is where maybe I should mention I'm a widow, or this is where, you know, maybe I should mention this or I should mention that. And I don't want pity from people at all. I've come to learn that there's a time to just stay quiet because you're only going to get pity. And then there's a time that you mention your experience because you can help someone else. When you talk about your experience, you can say, hey, look at me, I'm here. I made it, and I still make it every single day. I think that's the gist of, that chapter for me is kind of like, here, you know what? Yeah, this is what we're going through. This is what we've been through, and continue to go through. But don't feel bad for me. Don't feel bad for me because you have your loss. You have your trauma. We all have a story. If you don't by now, I mean, that's amazing. Part of me feels kind of scared for you though, because everybody is going to experience something. And I'm grateful that I'm 48. I'm grateful that I've been through some really cruddy lessons, but I've learned a lot and I've grown a lot. And I know people older than me that don't have the appreciation for life and the joy for life that I have. And I have those things because of what I've been through, and because of the way that, not necessarily because of what I've been through, but because of the way that I chose to heal from those things, the way that I chose to face the trauma in my life. Many people will choose to face it in a different way and to be in a place where they sometimes don't want to pull out of it, whether they're going to stay on the pity train. I just don't find that the pity train's ever going to help anyone. And that's what that's about for me, is just like, don't feel bad for me, because we're together and we're alive and we get to experience life and joy every day as long as we want to see it. You can sit there and fight with your teenage daughter and be angry and upset, and at the same time you can still say, thank God that I get to do this. Thank God that my child is alive and well and has that spirit inside to be here doing this with me right now. Thank God that we get that stage. Everyone says, oh, it's a stage. Well, I have friends who lost their children young. I have friends who lost their children when their children were in high school. I get to argue with my kids. So it's all in how you look at it.
I love that. That's something that a motto I've taken on is replace have to with get to. I have to drive my daughter and I have to, feed her, and I have to, and so it's like, no, I get to. She's a little fighter and she's alive. And so I get to take care of her. I get to be her caregiver. I get to be her mom. So I love that. Yeah. And a lot of what Felicia and I do when it comes to our personal finances, we focus on purpose. And, when we're working with people and talking, and, we start off with, well, what is your purpose? And then make a financial plan around that. So I know you've shared with me. So can you share with everybody, what's your purpose?
My purpose, you mean financially or career-wise? What?
They're one and the same. Life and money, all the same.
So, right. Well, that's the thing. I think when you find what you do that you love and that's your purpose, the rest comes. My purpose, I feel like my purpose, I'm still here. I've lost both my parents, my brother, my son, my husband. I'm still here. And not only am I still here, but in my heart, by the grace of God, I have a spirit inside of me, and I have hope and faith. And for me, that just shows that my purpose is to give that to other people, to live my life with joy, to have a career where I'm life coaching and personal training, doing wellness challenges with people, teaching group fitness classes, motivational speaking, doing things that I always say are kicking people in the ass. That's what I say. That's what I do for a living. I kick people in the ass. I tell them, get your head out of your butt. Life's too short. There's a purpose out there. I love motivational speaking, and I love the things that I do that can help to pump other people up, because I want to see other people stand taller and feel like, okay, yeah, you know what? This didn't happen necessarily to hurt me. This didn't happen directly because the world hates me, or God hates me, or the universe hates me, or whatever you believe in. My purpose is to help other people to see, and I say it all the time, that no matter what, you can still thrive, not just survive, not just, I mean, you get one life, you're going to trudge through, you're going to have, 90% of your days be crappy. No, you're going to thrive, and you might need help doing that. And I'm the helper. I teach people resiliency skills. I teach people coping strategies, the things that worked for me, the things that I've learned about that have worked for others, the research that's out there on ways to cope, ways to heal. Those are the things that give me purpose. Those are the things that like you said, like they go hand in hand. And yeah, I want to pay my bills. I want to I want to get to that point where I'm not sitting there like every week trying to figure out, okay, what's going to groceries, what's going to gas, what's going here, what do we have left over. It would be amazing, obviously, to be at that point, but I also know I'm going to be at that point because I've gotten, I got a hit like everyone else did during COVID. And that's like one thing I stress is like, it's not me or you or her or him. It's all of us. And so when we have to rebuild, we rebuild. And since then, I've rebuilt and continue to do so. In every year, it's gotten a little bit better, a little bit better. I just really know that those big things are coming as I continue to follow my purpose. I have faith that those big things are coming that will just kind of fall into place, personally, professionally, and financially.
There's so much to unpack in what you were sharing, but I love the idea. I love what you said about you're here to thrive and not just survive. And you help people with resilience. And I really love the fact that you said your job is to really kick people's butt, kick people's ass. And I think that is really powerful. And I think that there's a lot. And the other thing that really kind of just struck me is you were talking about the fact that and it's something that I often will say is, I wrote this book because everybody, if they haven't been through it themselves, has had somebody in their lives who's been through one of the 5Ds. They've been through a divorce themselves, or they've been through the death of a partner themselves, or somebody around them has, or they've got a sister or a brother. But I mean, there's been so much that you shared with us that I think is really powerful. And I love the fact that you are out there encouraging people and talking about hope and joy, which is not something that people often think about in relationships to somebody who has been through a loss. And so I just thank you for being here today and sharing what you share. So if I need to get a copy of your book, can I go to Amazon and get a copy of your book?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. And it is on Amazon. Refuse to Sink.
Perfect.
I also have a journal on Amazon, and that is, it's called Fostering Resiliency. I probably had, I'm like, sure I have a copy here, but it's the same type of cover, the same color. And what that is, as I've met people and I've taught a resiliency workshop, I noticed that journaling isn't something that everyone's tried. Lots of people have no idea how to get started journaling. That's why I published this simple little journal, Fostering Resiliency, a journal, on Amazon. I created this because it's filled with motivational quotes and also writing prompts. It prompts you to do things like make a grateful list or talk about your day. It gives you prompts, and it's not long, but it's just something that can get someone started if they want to start journaling or want to see if it would work, but don't really know what to do first.
Right. That sounds like a great tool. And we will link to that in our show notes.
Oh, thank you.
Some takeaways I'm getting here is get life insurance, talk to your partner about, the division of the money duties, that it is something to have that conversation with the other person. And sometimes it might be a fight, but that's okay. Fights are okay. That's one way to communicate too. You got to communicate with your partner. So having that conversation, and your last point there about journaling, that's huge. That's something I used to do when I was younger, and I haven't done that. So I'm definitely going to take that advice too, and use that. And I love that it's prompts. So because when you get a blank book and you sit in front of it, it's kind of like a screen blinking at you. So I love that there's like the quotes and the prompts and stuff like that, and how helpful that can be.
Thanks. Yeah, it's definitely been helpful for me. I do think, especially, I don't know, some days everything is swirling in your head and you just don't even know where to go. You don't know what to do. And then I always say whatever is going on around you gets inside of you, and it has to come out somehow. It's either going to come out journaling, talking to a friend, on a run, kickboxing, or something productive for you, or it's going to come out as anger and nastiness towards the people that you're the closest to. So it's your choice.
All right. Well, our last question we have for you is, we always end the podcast with asking each of our people we interview, what song is the soundtrack of your life right now?
Definitely the same song that's been the soundtrack for a while. I would say Garth Brooks, Standing Outside the Fire. I have always resonated. I remember hearing that when it first came out, and it was just a catchy tune. But as I grew and learned, and especially after I lost my husband, I remember hearing that, and life is not tried, it's just merely survived if you're standing outside the fire. So in those lyrics, he talks about getting burned. He talks about like the fear of getting burned, the fear of failure, the fear of losing things. But are you really living your life if you're not trying? If you're not getting in there and shooting your shot and going for what you want, then why are you here? Like, just get in there and do it. And I feel like that's just always been a really inspirational song to me, and it pushes me to get in there. And I really believe that that's what I've done with my life and will continue to do.
Well, thank you, Kelly. So once again, go look in our show notes here to get her book, her journal. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us and being open to talking about all of your experiences. If you want to hear more from Her Money Story, please go to hermoneystory.com and subscribe, leave us your email. We would love to hear from you, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you.